Today's topic is dazzling dahlias. First, I want to highlight a few things about this webinar series you may not already know. If you missed a webinar, you'll find recordings on our website shown on this slide, right in the middle of it. We'll send everyone with registration a recording, and if you have unanswered questions, you're invited to contact us by email. You see, we really want to be part of your gardening success. Dahlias add color and exuberance to the summer garden. Walking in the field like this is a favorite outing for my family. Although I've grown dahlias for decades, I always find new inspirations. This session will offer all you need to know to be successful with dahlias. We will cover selections, tips for planting and growing, and a little more. Dahlias are in the aster family. In their native habitats in the tropics, dahlias grow at high elevations. This tells us they thrive in places with sunny, warm days and cooler nights. The Aztec people used dahlias for food and medicine, and for the past 250 years, they've been grown primarily for ornamental values. The illustration on this slide shows Dahlia coccinea, which is a parent of European single dahlias, appeared in a botanical magazine way back in 1804. We don't yet know the Dahlia family tree, but experts think there are 42 species. There are two projects supported by the American Dahlia Society I think are worth mentioning. The first one is a Stanford University study compare 15 wild species and 11 cultivated varieties, and essentially found the same genetic makeup. So scientists think there are probably about 40 wild species of dahlias, and they lump all of the cultivated varieties we grow in gardens into one species called Dahlia variabilis. So if you find this confusing, think of the world of dogs. A German Shepherd and a Chihuahua may look nothing alike, but both are descendants of wolves and have the same genes. The second study is done by Auburn University on Dahlia genome, and they are on the cusp of figuring out the Dahlia family tree. It's very exciting. There's no published paper yet, but I've put the links to progress report on the bottom of this page. Now, all of this is kind of theoretical and interesting, but I think the most relevant to us gardeners is dahlias or tetraploids. This means that they have four sets of chromosomes, not two for humans, not eight like people once thought for dahlias. A tetraploid is not unusual for flowering plants and ferns, and in general, it triggers a more robust plant. Now you might wonder if garden dahlias have the same genes, how do we sort them into groups? By flower morphology. This dahlia flower, like other members of the aster family, is a composite flower. So what we normally think of as one flower actually is a composite of individual flowers called floret. The petals are actually ray florets surrounding a center of disc florets. To sort dahlias into groups, we have to consider the central disc and the petal shape. We begin by asking, is the central disc visible? If yes, it's open center where the disc florets are exposed. And if no, it's double bloom where the disc florets are wrapped in ray florets. Then we ask, what is the shape of the petal? The petals may be flat or revolute if they curl backwards, or involute if they curl inward. Next, we check how is the tip of a petal. If the end is forked, it is laciniated. a common petal comes to a point. So based on these flower attributes, we group dahlias into 14 forms. And there is an international registry that is based in the UK, keeping track of dahlia cultivars and putting them into one of these 14 forms. And the last time I checked, there are about 57,000 dahlia cultivars in this international registry. So let's look at some of the common forms. Cactus have rolled petals. Decorative usually have flat petals, and laciniated have petals with forked ends. Anemone has a dense cluster of long disc florets. Balls, the ray florets show a spiral pattern. And the collarette has one row of outer petals and an inner circle of irregular petals to make a collar around the disc. Orchid has open center, involute florets, usually partially overlapping. Pompons are small balls about 2 inches or less, and water lily has multiple rows of broad and flat ray florets around a closed center. There are some less common forms, including stellar with long and slender petals curved backwards. Miniature ball, well, that's self-explanatory. And novelty is a category where something just doesn't quite fit elsewhere. And this example shows uh, a flower that has petals, each petal with multiple colors on the 7-inch bloom. And occasionally you'll find a species dahlia for sale. I've grown Dahlia sorrensenii, sometimes it's called a wild form, and Dahlia imperialis, also called tree dahlia. The tree dahlia can get to about 25 feet in a native habitat, but only about 10 feet in gardens. Now notice these typical species dahlia have single flowers. The double flower varieties were bred later by humans. Dahlias seem to enjoy growing popularity with gardeners and growers. When I go to garden shows, I see more and more vendors of dahlia tubers, and I also see increasing number of potted plants at nurseries. If you want a specific cultivar, you probably will have better luck with a specialty grower. But if you're new to growing dahlias, you might begin with a potted plant from a nursery. And if there's a Dahlia Society near you, definitely go to their sales because these are great places to pick up favorite plants of people who are just crazy about dahlias, and they can tell you all about why any variety is worthy of a space in your garden. Now, when you select a dahlia, you want to think about a few things. The first one, pretty obvious, plant size. The dahlia plants can range from 1 foot miniatures to 6 foot or even taller plants. So you definitely want to find a space to match the size that it will reach. Plant vigor can also vary. Some of the varieties are just stronger than others, and I prefer the stronger ones because, frankly, they're just easygoing and less work. So you may want to pay attention to the plant description and get one that is particularly vigorous if that's what you'd like. Bloom period is another important factor. Usually is divided into early, mid, or late bloomers. With the early bloomers begin to show flowers about 75 days after planting, but the late bloomers, you'll have to wait about 120 days. And of course, flower and foliage colors are important as well. But I think the one thing that makes dahlias really fascinating is the wide range of flower size, from the size of our dinner plates to just a little bigger than a golf ball. These pictures are in proportion to their life size. you can see the large flower, the one that has an 11-inch bloom, definitely demands a lot of energy to make, and on average takes about 120 days to come. So let's say we planted in mid-May. Um, that flower, you probably won't see it until mid-September or later. But if you choose a variety that has a medium-sized bloom, usually it takes 90 days. So with a mid-May planting, you can begin to see these blooms in mid-August. And with the smaller flowers, with your mid-May planting, 75 days later, you can see it maybe in late July. And if you like cut flowers, you'll want to go beyond just the flower color and size and pay attention to the bloom season, as we've just talked about. The thing about dahlias is if you get an early variety and it begins to bloom in July, it will keep blooming into August, September, October. Usually the dahlia will bloom until it's killed by frost. So it can give you so many months of flowers, and think about the extra number of blooms in 1 month or 2 months. So the large flowers, the late season bloomers, are definitely stunners, but you have a long wait, and you'll have to think about how you want to use the flowers and make the decision. If you shop online, most of the online sources will have a category for cut flowers, and they tend to include early and mid-season varieties with long and strong stems to support the bloom. Let me tell you a little secret. The Oregon State University president is putting in a foodscape in her garden. And a foodscape is where we grow edible plants, fruit trees, shrubs, and vegetables next to flowers. And I'm helping with that project, and I've suggested these dahlias for her cutting garden. And don't forget the foliage color. This is a part of my garden where I used a dark leaf dahlias. This is early in the season where you can see the foliage beginning and no flowers yet. Can you find them? This is where they are. Okay, let's go tuber shopping. A good tuber should feel firm, have no or minimal shriveling, and no visible signs of mold or rot. The tuber size is not important because a small tuber can grow a big plant and vice versa. But eyes are very important. So look at that colored up photo in the bottom of the slide. See, A is tuber, and then move to the narrow part, neck, and then the enlarged part above neck, crown, and then there may be a little bit of old stem attached to it. It's in the crown region above the neck where you can expect to find eyes. And then look at the picture on the right-hand side of the slide. The eye on the tuber uh, way to the right is just a tiny little bump, barely visible. And then progressively, as we move to the left, it becomes more visible. It becomes even sort of looks like a small shoot. And then eventually it becomes a long shoot that's definitely very easy to spot. So when you purchased a tuber, and if you have a chance to choose it, be sure to get one that had visible eye bumps. Okay, let's practice. Can you find the tuber, the neck, the crown, and eyes in this photo? Very good. Well, if we plant a tuber, we can get a plant that looks exactly like the parent. And after growing a tuber for a season, it becomes a big clump, and then we can divide it. This illustration on the right shows a hypothetical clump that can be divided into two pieces. Now, each useful piece will need a tuber, a neck, and I, at least one. And if you're interested in giving this a try, I put a video link on the bottom of the page, which will take you through step by step. Now, if we start out with one tuber, but we really, really, really want to get many more plants right away for this season, this is an extra step you can take. So 2 months before you would normally plant into the garden, you plant your tuber in a tray, cover with a shallow layer of seedling mix. You know, seedling mix is formulated especially for starting seeds and usually has a fine texture to retain moisture. Anyway, set it up in a warm place. Ideally, the air temperature is 65 to 70, and you should use a grow light. Do this, make sure the seedling mix is moistened, and pretty soon the tuber will begin to sprout, just like the picture on the left side. When the shoots are 3 inches tall, then you cut them just above the tuber. Use a really sharp knife and be careful not to damage the tuber. And you want to sanitize in between cuts to clean your knife. Use 70% alcohol or 10% bleach. What you cut, the cutting, you can insert it into growing media like a good potting mix, and it will root there, and each one will grow into a plant this season. I put 2 video links on the page in case you're interested in seeing how this is done. And there is a third way to grow dahlias, and that's to begin with seeds. It's definitely the most economical way, and it can be a lot of fun because if you start out with seeds that are open pollinated, they don't come true to parents. So whatever shows up will be a surprise. For people who live in areas with long, warm summers, you can just directly sow into the garden. But otherwise, you'll want to start your seeds indoors and do this 4 to 8 weeks before planting out. If you use a heat mat, that will speed up sprouting. And I also put 2 links, the top two about seed starting, and they will show you tricks for pre-sprouting the seeds and planting your sprouts. And if you go the seed route, don't be discouraged if your seedling grow at different rates. Some will just be growing really great and others will be very slow to start. Remember, if you begin with open pollinated seeds, you're going to end up with many different cultivated varieties, and each one has its own characteristics. So expect a diversity in your tray of seeds. And if you really enjoy growing from seeds, you can also collect your own seeds in late summer. The ripe seeds will kind of look and feel papery, and you want to make sure that they are air dried before putting into storage because moisture can induce rot and damage your seeds. The bottom one of the 3 videos on the screen is about seed saving if you're interested in giving that a try. So dahlias grow best in full sun and warm soil. You would want to plant dahlias into the garden when you plant out tomatoes into the garden. Both of them like soil at about 60 degrees. The best soil is loose, fertile, and well-drained. If you plant your dahlia in less than ideal place, not full sun, the soil is maybe a little heavier, they will still grow. They will probably just not be as robust, and you may get fewer flowers. And remember, containers are always an option. Um, if your ideal site is not something that has garden bed space, but you can put a container there. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to plant into containers. Okay, but first let's talk about testing soil drainage because drainage is so important to where we put dahlias. You want to dig a hole that's 1 foot deep and at least 1 foot in diameter. keep the side straight, and fill it with water to let it sit overnight. Come back the next morning and refill the hole, and then begin to measure the depth of water every hour. If the water drains 2 inches per hour, it's perfect. If it's slower or faster, you may need to do something. If the drain rate is less than 1 inch per hour, that is too slow. You'll have to improve the drainage by adding organic matter. And of course, you can also install drain tiles, elevate the bed, or just plant something that really likes wet feet in that spot. If the water is draining faster than 4 inches per hour, you have to add a lot of organic matter to increase the water holding capacity. When I moved into my current home, the soil was very compacted, and I used to walk around the garden with a rebar, just pushing it down here and there to kind of check the compaction. I think probably everyone in the audience knows compacted soil does not drain, and adding organic matter will fix the problem. Well, actually, organic matter feeds microbes, and microbes improve the soil structure and the drainage. Over the years, I added a lot of yard waste compost. It's readily available, very inexpensive, and it's good exercise. Um, and my soil definitely has improved over time. But many years later, I learned an alternative. If you are not in a rush, simply pile 4 inches or more arborist wood chips over an area and just wait. You may have to wait 6 months or even longer, but the soil will improve. It's pretty amazing. But I don't have the patience to wait 6 months or a year. I want fast results. So in my case, I would break up the soil and work in the organic matter to mix them pretty well. And then the beds are ready for planting. I know you're looking at the picture of the rototiller and think, whoa, that would be a convenient way to do it. But there's some issues you need to be aware of. The first thing is rototiller usually don't go that deep. Maybe they'll get 6 to 8 inches below the surface, but that seems to be the average depth that they will hit. The second thing is if you make too many passes using a rototiller, you can destroy your soil structure, and it's going to be really difficult to rebuild it. And finally, imagine an area where you've repeatedly rototilled. The top 6 to 8 inches, the soil will be loose, but what about the area below where the tiller can reach? You still have a compacted soil at that depth and below, and that is a barrier for water, air, and roots. So whatever you do to break up the shallower layers of soil, it's a good idea to use spading fork or broad fork to make deep channels, and that will really improve your soil over time and allow roots to go much deeper than the top 6 to 8 inches. Okay, earlier we talked about containers. Containers actually work really well for dahlias, especially the smaller types, dwarf, or the low-growing varieties. And we want to do basically what we normally do with container planting, use potting mix. If you plant a tuber into a container, you want to pre-moisten that potting mix and um, put it uh, uh, put it into the bottom of the container and lay your tuber flat on top of the potting mix that's been pre-moistened. And you would want the tuber to be about 4 inches or more below the top of the container. And the pre-moistened material will be enough to stimulate sprouting of the tuber. And after you begin to see the shoots come up, begin to water, and wait a month after the growth begins to add fertilizer. And because in containers we lose nutrient faster, you want to add fertilizer at a 2 week interval. So earlier we talked about how many days it takes to get flowers from dahlias. Uh, this is how I speed things up when I have an open garden in late June and I want dahlias in bloom. If I follow the regular rules and plant the dahlia tuber directly into the garden when the soil is warm enough, that's not possible. So this is what I do. 4 to 6 weeks before planting into the garden, I plant my tubers in a pot. And I choose a pot that's big enough or that has a big enough diameter for the tuber to be able to lay flat in it. And I put some pre-moistened potting mix in the bottom. And then I put the tuber on top of the potting mix, eyes facing up. And if it already has sprouted, I'll shorten it to no more than an inch. Then I'll fill the pot to about 1 inch below the rim. And then I wait until the shoots begin. I begin to water and I put it under grow light or outside for a robust looking plant. So if you do this, if you have a heated area, you'll get much faster result. If you have a greenhouse, that's great. And if you are trying to grow that dahlia plant, the young plant, indoors, it's best to use grow light. So I have done this by planting the tuber and keeping it in the garage because I don't have a greenhouse. And when the shoots emerge, I take them outside to a south-facing wall where they will be, it's the warmest microclimate that I have. And overnight, either I bring them into the garage or I put roll cover wrap around the containers to keep them warm overnight. And I've had great results. And don't forget, there's a really easy way to make raised beds. If you grow a lot of dahlia, having a raised bed for them is actually a simple way to do it. And this illustration from OSU shows that you can simply mound soil to form raised bed with no frames. And now you're looking at this illustration thinking, well, where did they get the soil to make the mounds? Well, they dug it out from the path between these beds. So they dig the soil from the path, mound it up, and then remember your dahlia growing medium or dahlia bed should have a lot of organic matter and really nice, rich soil. So you're probably adding a lot of compost or other organic matter, and that is going to help you gain the elevated beds you need. And you only need about 6 inches deep. This illustration shows 4 feet wide base and 3 feet on the top with the sloped side. I think for dahlias, you can do with a smaller bed, probably 3 foot base, 2 foot on the top, and 6 foot deep. I mean, 6 inches deep should be sufficient. My friends Laura and Mark are dahlia lovers. They grow hundreds of dahlias every year. This is one of their dahlia beds. You can see that they have elevated by mounding the soil to maybe roughly 6 inches at the peak. And notice the cover walkway for weed control. And also the photo on the left, you can see those metal stakes along the perimeter of the bed. And then the photo on the right, you can see nylon mesh that are attached or stretched by these metal posts. And they have 6 inch opening, and that's how they support their tall dahlias. All right, now our soil is loose, fertile, and warm, and we can plant into the ground. Let's dig a hole 1 foot deep, at least 1 foot in diameter, and put some soil back so our tuber is at about 4 to 6 inches below ground. Lay it flat if you can, and let the eyes face up. It's kind of a good practice, but really, if you have the eye face down, they'll find their way to grow around and still come up. And if the eyes had already sprouted, you want to shorten it to no more than an inch. And here is a very important thing. Please, please insert the stake before you cover up the hole. Insert the stake when you can still see where the tuber is. Then you fill the hole. And allow about 2 feet between plants. That's the recommendation for most dahlias. Now, what if we're planting a potted plant? Maybe you bought a potted plant from the nursery, but you want to grow it in the garden. So you want to have the area soil already loosened, amended with organic matter, and then you make a hole basically to match the size of the container and transfer the plant and the container media into the hole. Check, make sure your tuber is 4 to 6 inches below the soil level. And again, insert the stake near the eye when you can still see the tuber. Then fill the hole. Some dahlias can get to 6, 7 feet tall, and they definitely need support. I think as a rule, maybe you probably should support dahlias that are 4 feet or taller. And there are two things to remember. I said earlier, plant your support stake when you can still see the tuber. And there's so many ways to support a dahlia, single or multiple stakes, cage, strain, netting. The link on the bottom of the page shows many pictures and lots of ideas. The important thing to remember is the tie around the plant should be loose enough so you don't girdle the plant, because as it grows over the season, obviously it will gain in size. I think this is really pretty. Here they use multiple stakes to form a perimeter and twine between pairs of stakes. And remember the picture I showed you earlier from Laura and Mark's garden? They have the mounded dahlia bed using metal stakes for the perimeter and the nylon netting with 6 inch square opening between them. So look at what you have and use your creativity. Now, probably the worst nemesis of the tender dahlia shoot are slugs. In one night, slugs can wipe out a whole bed of young shoots. The two critical times for slug control are in the fall, September, October, before fall rain comes and egg laying begins. And the second important time is early spring when the eggs hatch. You'll want to use whatever favorite method that works well for slug control. I've tried them all, bait, trap, hand picking, and my current favorite is the bread dough slurry. Does that sound yummy? Slugs think so. So this is what you do. You mix 1 cup of flour, 2 cups of water, and 1 packet of yeast. You adjust the water amount to get a slurry consistency. And then you place this mixture into a container, bury it in the garden, and the top of the container should be at or just above ground. Okay, so now I have the good news and the bad news. The good news is this really works. This came from Oregon State University's slug research program. And make this thing, put it in your garden, and so many slugs will come out of seemingly nowhere. You'll be shocked how many slugs are hiding in your garden. The bad news is it does not kill, it just attracts. So you're going to have to figure out how to deal with all of these slugs and dispatch them accordingly. And you'll have to check the consistency of your slurry over time because it'll dry out and wouldn't work as well. So you'll have to add water to kind of keep the right consistency so it'll continue to work. And what about fertilizing? Well, if you grow tomatoes, the same fertilizer works for dahlia. This is the OSU's recommendation. Choose a fertilizer that has a 1:2 nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium ratio. And be careful not to use something that is high in nitrogen because too much nitrogen will give you weak stem, small or no flowers, and a tuber that will rot or shrivel during storage. And you don't, oh, and if you grow in containers, I've made this mistake myself. If you grow in containers, look at the container medium that you choose and read the fine print because often they have fertilizer added already. And usually it's a fertilizer analysis that's high in nitrogen. So make sure that you're not inadvertently planting your dahlia into the wrong um, container medium. All right, so back to fertilizer. You want to begin fertilizing 1 month after planting, and then you want to continue every 3 to 4 weeks to kind of keep up the performance of growth and flowering. And the fertilizer should go around a 1 foot ring around the stem, work it in lightly and water it. And then you want to stop in September, and that will help to harden off the tuber. Ooh, something else forgot to mention. Um, we're just talking about fertilizer as if we know nothing about your soil and what's already in the soil. But frankly, many of us who have been amending our garden with compost year after year most likely have a very high concentration of phosphorus built up in our soil. And potassium is um, a nutrient that is hardly ever in shortage in our area. So I'm trying to say this in the long way, and that is most of us probably do not need phosphorus and potassium. We only need nitrogen for our plants. And if you pay 20 some dollars to do a soil test, that's what you're likely to find out. So in my garden, I use nitrogen only, and I use a feather meal, which is an organic form. Unless for plants I grow in containers, then I would use a water-soluble form of a complete fertilizer that has nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And of course, you can also look at the way the plant is growing and how it's flowering for clues of whether it really needs additional fertilizing. Okay, this is something, if you don't do anything else, do this. Mark it on your calendar. Um, Pruning. When your dahlia young plant is about 12 foot or taller, you want to practice pruning by making what's called a heading cut. Remember heading cut from Pruning 101? Heading cut is to remove the top shoot or the tip of a plant. And by doing that, we take away the hormone that is associated with the top shoot and whose job is to control the side shoots below from growing. If we take off the tip, the side shoots will begin to grow. And in dahlia, we get a bushier plant with many more flowers, exactly what we want. So this one cut is really important. And ideally, you're making the cut when you can have 4 pairs of leaves down below. See those opposite leaves? Okay. So check your plant and if it's 14 inches, 6 inches tall, no problem. Just sort of right around that size. Do this cut and it will pay dividends for the rest of the season. This is a strictly optional cut. The dahlia flowers usually grow in threes, and some people who like the top flower to be bigger, they will do this, what's called the disbudding, remove the side buds to get a bigger flower. Strictly optional. But if you're planning to enter your flower at the county show or some other place for competition and you want a big flower, this is something that you can do. And of course, I think all of us know that if we remove the spent flowers, the plant can focus the energy on growing more flowers rather than producing seeds. So the dahlia spent flower looks conical, like this little picture, versus the fresh buds, they're round and flat. We want to follow the same rules for watering plants when we water dahlia. It's better to water less often and do a thorough job to moisten the entire root zone each time. Remember, the tubers are planted about 4 to 6 inches below the soil, so you can let the um, soil, the top 2, 3 inches, dry out between watering session. And if your area gets a prolonged heat wave, kind of pay attention to the soil temperature. If the soil gets to 95 degrees, you will want to water the area around the root zone in order to relieve the heat stress on your dahlia tubers. And of course, mulch is great because mulch can cool the soil, reduce the evaporation. All around, it's a good thing. Um, I recommend using mulch, but you want to mulch before heat comes, not when you plant, because mulching keeps the soil cool. So if you do it at planting, that's just going to delay the growth of your dahlia tuber. And there are many organic choices, leaf mold, yard waste, wood chips, rotted manure. All of them are good. And of course, the great thing about organic mulch is over time, they also return nutrients to the soil and they also provide habitats for critters. Okay, now it's high season and our garden is full of flowers and we want to bring some dahlias into the house. The best time to cut dahlia is when the flower is full, when the plant is fully hydrated and therefore the flower is hydrated. And that could be early in the day. It could be late in the evening after a watering session. And you want to cut your flowers when it's about 3/4 open. They will not continue to open after they're cut. There are a few things you can do to extend the vase life. Strip the leaves after you cut the stem. You want to put it in clean water right away. Um, Keep the bloom in a cool area that's out of direct sunlight until you're ready to use it. And you can expect about 5 days in the vase. I grow mostly single dahlias because the flowers fit better, easier with my garden design. And I know firsthand they don't make good cut flowers. We've talked earlier about flower size. The medium-sized double flower varieties tend to make better cut flowers. And before bringing the dahlia into your home, you want to shake them to dislodge earwigs that may be hiding in the flowers. Well, this is what we know about earwigs. They are nocturnal, so you tend not to see them out in the open. They're omnivores. They do feed on aphids and other small insects. And they also feed on dead bugs and plant debris in the garden. So they are beneficial. And I find them basically a nuisance. And if I shake the flower to dislodge them before bringing the flower in, they really don't bother me. And you also have the option of just removing the leaf litter from your beds, and that will take away hiding places for earwigs. There are several types of virus that can infect dahlias. And there are a few things that gardeners can do. The first thing is learn to recognize the symptoms of virus infection And I put a link on the bottom of this page. It's a wonderful presentation, actually a series of slides that show the virus-infected plants. So you can look at the pictures to get an idea of how they're supposed to look. The well, this is helpful, but you should also know that some virus-infected plants do not show any symptoms at all. So the second thing gardeners can do is when you buy a tuber or a plant, ask if the tuber is clean and have no virus, and ask what is their policy for perhaps replacing something if it's contaminated. And something else we all can do is sanitation in our gardens. Clean the tools in between cutting the plants, remove the infected parts. And if you find a plant that really is infected, throw it out. Definitely do not share it with anybody else. And also know that there are different kinds of garden critters that are vectors, which means that they transport and spread these viruses, and that include thrips, aphids, and nematodes. So the link on the top of the page takes you to a Washington State University Dahlia virus study program, and you can learn a whole lot more about it. But let's take a look at some of these vectors. So thrips, they are tiny sucking insects. The adult feeds on different parts of flowers and plants, and they lay eggs in flowers, and when the eggs hatch, they just feed on the plants right there. They can go through several generations in a year. And the simplest thing to do is hose the plant with water jets in the morning. There are biological controls if you want to give it a try. And aphids, I think everyone is probably familiar with them. Tiny sucking insects. Adults feed on the plants, and eggs will overwinter in the plants, and they can go through 2 to 16 generations in 1 year. So they're pretty awesome in terms of producing a lot to keep us busy in our gardens. We can monitor with the yellow sticky traps, and we can hose them off with water jets. And there are also a lot of biological control choices. So now this is the end of summer into fall. And before winter comes, we need to decide whether we're going to dig up the tuber. If we can keep the ground dry and warm, not digging is definitely an option. And our success will depend on the soil quality. Lighter soil will give tuber a better chance. Heavier soil will trap a lot of moisture and increase the chance of rot. And weather is definitely a very important factor. So you want to think about, does winter freeze go beyond 4 inches in your area to affect the tuber? And if you choose to overwinter by leaving the tuber in the ground, you simply cut off the plant after freeze, cover the root zone with 6 mil plastic or equivalent, and pile 4 inches of leaves, straw, or equivalent on top, and just wait until spring comes. And this is my garden. So the left photo shows the plant is cut down, and I sprinkle some sluggo, and I have access to coffee sacks, so I fold them up into quarters and then pile a whole bunch of them over the root zone. And then I heap compost about 3, 4 inches over the sacks. And over the years, I've tried pie plates, nursery containers, plastic sheets. Use what you have. As long as you can keep the roots warm and dry, it will work. And since my MO is no dig, when the dahlia tuber is left in the ground year after year, they can become congested and less productive. So best practice is picking up or lifting the tuber every 3 years and divide them. And we've talked earlier in dividing, we need to have tuber, neck, and eye in a viable piece. And if you live in the colder area, you can treat your dahlias as annuals, or you can dig them up. And this is what you would do. You would lift the tuber after it's grown for about 120 days in the ground, clean it up, cut off the roots, cut off the damaged parts. You can keep it as a clump or divide it, air dry, then put into storage. And in storage, you want to inspect for rot. And let's take a look at each step. So there is a link to an article that goes into more details if you are interested in learning more about doing this. But look at the photos. In the left, we're lifting up the tuber clump. In the right, a clump has been lifted and we're shaking off some of the soil. And then we clean it, rinse it off, and then we cut off the roots. We just want to end up with the clean tubers. And then we remove the stem. See the photo on the left, cutting off the stem. And then we want to split up the clump. We chose to divide the clump before putting it into storage. And the benefit of doing that in the fall is the stem and neck have more moisture and they're easier to cut. Plus, some of the tubers have no eyes. We can just throw them out so we don't have to store as much. And now we air dry the pieces we want to keep for a day. Then we put it into storage. And the storage medium could be vermiculite, like in this photo. Other options include wood shaving, sawdust, and you can put them in containers, bags, boxes. And the important thing about storage is temperature. It has to be above freezing, and around 40 degrees is ideal. Well, that is the end of my presentation. You who have signed up for this webinar will receive all of these links by email. But for people who watch this program outside of the webinar series, I'm putting this on for their benefit. And finally, I want to thank Julie Moore and Laura and Mark Odenkamp for their help with my research on this talk. And now, let's see if we have questions.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
We do indeed have a few questions. That was such a complete presentation on dahlias. I wish I could tell you that I was a better steward of my dahlias in my garden, but now you gave me some tips and things to think about. A couple questions. When you have your dahlias in the ground, you have this beautiful dahlia you purchased, you put it in the ground. How many years, just to reiterate, and I know you covered this, how many years do you leave it in the ground before you consider dividing it?
3.
And when is the best time to dig it up and divide it?
I do it in the spring. You can
Okay.
do it in the fall, but if you do it in the fall, then you're committed to,
Yeah, caring for it over the
store it for
winter.
the winter,
Mhm.
and I don't want to do that.
Right. So it depends on the
So
taste of the gardener.
yeah, so my spring division will happen probably in April.
Okay. Okay. Great answer. One of our viewers wants to start her dahlias a little bit early in a pot before she puts them in the ground when the ground is 60 degrees. So can you give her some feeling for timing? She wants to make sure she has the timing right because she loves her dahlias, and so she'd like to wake them up a little bit in a pot, get them coming up before she places them in the ground.
Yeah, if she planted them into the ground from a container where she started the plant, I would
Hmm.
start 4 to 6 weeks before the regular planting out into the garden.
Okay.
So, if I were planting the dahlia into the ground in mid-May, I would start late March, early April, like right now.
Okay, another question just came in that's very appropriate. So this viewer wants to know, should she wait until the soil warms up to 60 degrees before she digs them in the spring to divide them?
If she's going to plant them right back into the ground, yeah, that's probably a good idea because otherwise she'd be planting into really cold soil.
Cold soil, cold,
Yeah.
wet soil is not good for it. Okay, so for anyone whose dahlias are growing 6 or 7 feet tall, can you reiterate again what steps they need to take so that that doesn't happen to them? It's hard to stake something that tall.
I know you have to use tomato cages and yeah. Um, make one heading cut when your plant is about a foot tall. And that's for the regular size, not the miniature, because the miniatures will only grow to 12 to 18 inches.
Uh-huh.
And probably, you can pinch them, but don't make a big cut. But the regular size dahlia, when it's about a foot tall, pinch the top shoot. And that's going to give you side shoots and at least twice, if not 3 or 4 times, the leaf and the flowers.
Excellent. And they'll be so much happier to have so many more flowers and leaves.
Yeah.
And regarding pests, we did have a question about voles eating tubers. Um, any advice for that person who struggles with voles?
Yeah, voles are really tough to deal with, aren't they? Because they don't
Yeah,
they
they
don't even
really
dig their own
are.
tunnel. They just use, mow tunnel or gopher tunnel.
I know.
Um, really, the only way you can get around voles is by using cages, barriers underground, and that's a lot of work, and they can rust and fall apart over time. So, I don't know. I think I would consider just using some large containers and grow dahlias in containers.
I would too. I struggled with that. In fact, I just removed the dahlias from the bed where I had the vole problem and put them in pots for a while. And then I got brave after a few years and put them back, and the voles had kind of disappeared. But you're right. They even borrow tunnels, so they're just lazy. They should at least do the tunnel work
Yeah.
if they're going to
Well,
eat
you
your
you know, I
dahlia.
mean, you can trap them, but that's
Uh,
its own kind of work. Yeah.
It is his own kind of work. When you discussed cutting dahlias to bring inside and shaking off earwigs, a number of people asked about hot water, dipping the stems in hot water, and then cutting anew and putting them in. Can you enlighten us on any of that?
Yes. The interesting thing is this is one area where experts don't agree. Some cut flower experts swear by using hot water, roughly 160 degree, and dip the cut stem in that for, minutes, up to 10 minutes. And that's supposed to cure the cut end and prolong the vase life. And then others just think it's not important at all. It's more important, cut, put it in a bucket of clean, cool water right
Fresh
away
one.
and get it
Mhm.
out of the sun, put it in a cool place, and then cut again when you make your flower arrangement. So I don't, I don't know. It's
It's a
both
matter of
ha
taste.
it's
Hmm.
both schools have champions. Let me put it
Oh,
this way.
two camps. There's two
And
camps.
and everybody, yes, stand by their method. So, whatever works for you, give it a try, just like slug control.
Here's an interesting question.
Yeah.
This viewer used plastic wrap for tuber storage, which I think is a miracle, wrapping each tuber. That's wonderful. What she's wondering is, can she wake up the tubers in early April by just putting them on a tray out of the plastic without soil and then plant in May, or should she just wait and plant them in the soil in May?
I'm so glad she asked that question because I did put in the link in one of the slides about how to use plastic wrap for winter storage. And that was
Hmm.
a surprising thing to me because I thought plastic, they cannot breathe. They're supposed to be able to breathe, but hey, this is a method that's came from the American Dahlia Society website. And, so I thought people should know about it. And it's really economical in terms of space because you can just pack a lot of them in a tiny space. But in terms of waking them up, I think if they're kept in plastic and then she unwraps them a month before planting, uh, the tubers may shrivel. I mean, they may dry out. So,
So there's a reason to put them in the soil.
yeah,
Mhm.
they like a little higher humidity. So it kind of if she can create an environment where they can to keep them from drying out, I think that will be helpful. Um, but hey, if she wants to wake them up, why not just put them in a little bit of moistened
Pop.
seedling mix, yeah, and let
Hmm.
them begin to sprout. And,
Uh-huh.
she doesn't have to take cuttings to grow more sprouts. She can just plant the ones that are pre-sprouted, but just make sure your sprouts don't get too long because that will make it tricky to plant. You can break up the sprouts easily.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That's good. Excellent. And you would smile if you saw when you were talking about the slurry, the slug slurry, how many people responded to the slug slurry. Again, there are two camps here. One gentleman said his slurry is very thin and they will drown for him. And and one other lady was very dismayed because raccoons also were attracted to that and made just a horrible mess in her garden. So, there's always a downside to everything. I have a question for you. Do you get snails in your dough in your slurry, your bread dough slurry?
I've seen them, but I don't have a lot of snails. I have more slugs.
Yeah,
How about you?
I get a lot of slugs in those little slugs are so attracted, and I'm just so pleased that they've come from who knows where to this. But I don't, the snails are troubling for me, and they don't seem to be attracted to the bread dough as much as the slugs. But I'll take it. I'll take one passed over another. So, but, and last question, is straw a good mulch for dahlias?
Straw? Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good organic mulch.
Okay, that is our last question. Was wonderful presentation. You're inspiring me. I can't wait to get out in the garden and dig. We've had such wonderful weather. It's very early, and I don't think we all realize how quite so early it is, and the ground
When
is
I was
early.
when I was putting this talk together, I kept thinking, what flower in the garden can give us 3 months of bloom? And I think that's what makes dahlia really amazing. Maybe roses, they can give us a long season of bloom, but
They do give a very long season. But
so
I think dahlias, particularly because of their late season bloom, they do midsummer to clear into fall until first frost. So I think they can be delightful. So thanks so much for a wonderful
and
presentation.
oh, there's one thing that now I'm going to give you a quiz, Cheryl, before we
Oh
leave.
dear.
Okay.
Okay.
So remember the flowers form the open
Uh-huh.
center ones that you can see the disc flower?
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are double bloom, the center is kind of wrapped in petals. So, do you think the double bloom dahlias are used by pollinators?
They probably go for the single bloom one first. I mean,
Okay,
just a guess, but
okay. So, I was curious about that. And then I learned the double bloom ones, even though the center is wrapped, that's when the flower is in the ideal stage. So if you let that flower go a little past prime, the center does open
and they
and the
can have
pollinators
nexus.
come to pollinate. And that's how people who are breeding, amateur breeders, breed varieties by just allowing
Oh,
the bees to pollinate or, hand pollinate. So,
how great. What great
yeah.
information.
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that fun? Yeah.
It is fun. There's so much to learn and so much I don't know that
Intriguing
I
world of dahlias. Okay,
it is
well,
an
thanks
intriguer.
everybody for joining us. And thank you,
Yeah,
Cheryl, for
and
co-hosting.
stay tuned next week for non-bee pollinators. And if you thought of a question or we didn't get to your question, send the question with a photo to the email in your Zoom confirmation, and we'll try to get that answer to you.
Great.
Okay.
Well,
Bye, everybody.
bye.